The Velthoran armada hung in Earth's orbit like predators savoring their kill. Admiral Kreshva watched the blue marble turn slowly below, its surface scarred by the orbital bombardment that had silenced the human colonies on Luna and Mars 3. Cycles ago, the humans had fought fiercely, as was their nature, but numbers and superior technology had prevailed. Or so it seemed. "Status report," Kreshva commanded, her 6 arms manipulating the holographic displays with practiced efficiency. The bridge of the dreadnought Infinite Dominion hummed with the satisfaction of conquest. "All human military installations have been neutralized," reported Sub-Commander Yexral, his mandibles clicking with pleasure. "Their pathetic fleet was destroyed at the Battle of Titan. The remaining population centers show no signs of organized resistance." Kreshva's compound eyes studied the tactical display. 200 Velthoran warships maintained perfect formation around Earth's sphere of influence. Each vessel was a masterwork of destruction, capable of glassing entire continents. The humans' primitive chemical rockets and fusion drives had been no match for their gravity wave propulsion and quantum torpedo arrays. "Curious," mused Tactical Officer Nixandra, her scaled head tilting as she examined her instruments. "I'm detecting unusual gravitational fluctuations in the outer system. Very subtle, almost like shadows in space-time itself." Kreshva dismissed the concern with a wave of her primary arm. "Debris from the asteroid belt mining operations we destroyed. The humans were always clumsy with their industrial efforts. But Nixandra's concern was well-founded. In the cold reaches beyond Pluto's orbit, Captain Morrigan Vex stood on the bridge of the ESS Shadowhawk, her ice-blue eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the alien fleet's disposition. Around her, 37 other stealth vessels maintained their positions in what the enemy believed was empty space. "Phantom Protocol has been active for 8 months," reported Lieutenant Commander Cale Draxton, his voice barely above a whisper. "Enemy sensors show no indication they've detected our presence." The Shadowhawk was humanity's greatest secret, a warship that existed in a state of partial dimensional displacement, occupying the same space as normal matter while remaining, invisible to conventional detection methods. Its hull was constructed from metamaterials that bent space-time around the vessel, creating pockets of nothingness that sensors simply couldn't perceive. Vex had watched helplessly as the Velthoran fleet had devastated humanity's outer colonies. Orders from Earth Command had been clear: maintain stealth at all costs, gather intelligence, and await the signal. The hardest part hadn't been the technology, it had been the silence, watching their people die while remaining hidden. "Ma'am," whispered Communications Officer Lysander Cairn, "we're receiving the activation codes. All Phantom Fleet vessels are reporting ready status." Vex's lips curved into a predator's smile. The Velthorans had made a critical error in their assessment of human nature. They had assumed that the destruction of humanity's visible fleet meant total victory. They had never considered that their prey might have teeth they couldn't see. "Signal all vessels," Vex commanded. "Operation Revenant is authorized. It's time to show these bastards what happens when you corner a human." In the depths of space, 38 ghosts prepared to become very real indeed. The dimensional displacement drives hummed with barely contained energy as the Phantom Fleet began its approach. Each vessel moved like a wraith through the void, their exotic matter cores warping reality itself to maintain perfect stealth. Captain Vex studied the enemy formation, noting how confidently they maintained their loose orbital pattern. Predators so certain of their victory they'd grown careless. "Enemy fleet disposition confirms intelligence reports," Draxton observed, his fingers dancing across quantum encryption keypads. "They're using standard Velthoran victory formation, maximum coverage with minimal defensive clustering. They're not expecting resistance." Vex nodded grimly. The Velthorans were notorious throughout the galaxy for their methodical approach to conquest. They would establish orbital dominance, eliminate all visible resistance, then begin the slow process of planetary subjugation. Their technology was superior to most species they encountered, but their tactics were predictable, fatally so. Range to primary targets? Vex inquired. Optimal firing position in 12 minutes, reported Weapons Officer Tamsin Vale, her cybernetic. Implants interfacing directly with the ship's targeting systems. Phantom torpedoes are armed and ready. Each warhead carries enough exotic matter to punch through their quantum shielding. The Phantom Fleet's weapons were as revolutionary as their stealth systems. Instead of conventional explosives or energy, beams. They fired projectiles that existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. When they struck a target, they would collapse into normal space-time, creating devastating implosions that enemy shields couldn't deflect. Meanwhile, aboard the Infinite Dominion, Admiral Kreshva was growing increasingly suspicious of Nix Andra's gravitational readings. The fluctuations weren't random. They showed patterns, as if something massive was moving through space in formation. Run a deep spectrum analysis, Kreshva ordered. Include tachyon resonance and quantum foam disturbance. Patterns. Nixandra's claws clicked rapidly across her instruments. Admiral, the readings are impossible. I'm detecting gravitational signatures that suggest objects of significant mass, but there's nothing on any of our sensors. It's as if what? Kreshva's voice carried a dangerous edge, as if someone has learned to hide entire fleets in folded space. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Every Velthoran on the bridge understood the implications. If an enemy had developed dimensional stealth technology, their entire tactical doctrine was obsolete. Impossible, Kreshva declared, but her certainty was wavering. Our intelligence indicated humans barely understood quantum mechanics. They couldn't have... The tactical display erupted in warnings as 38 new contacts materialized. From nowhere, their positions surrounding the Velthoran fleet in a perfect sphere of death. For a moment, the alien commanders stared in disbelief as ships that shouldn't exist appeared on their screens like ghosts becoming solid. All ships, Vex broadcast across both human and alien communication frequencies, her voice carrying the cold promise of retribution. This is Captain Morrigan Vex of the Earth Stellar Navy Phantom Fleet. You are surrounded by forces you cannot see, cannot track, and cannot escape. You came to our system believing us defeated. Allow me to correct that misconception. Aboard the Infinite Dominion, chaos erupted as damage control teams scrambled to understand how an entire enemy fleet had appeared within their formation. The Velthoran superiority complex crumbled in an instant, replaced by the primal fear of predators, who had suddenly become prey. Impossible sensors readings, Nixandra reported, her voice trembling. They're not just using stealth. They're existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our weapons can't lock onto targets that aren't entirely in our reality. Kreshva's world shattered as she realized the magnitude of their tactical disaster. The humans hadn't been defeated. They had been patient, waiting for exactly this moment of Velthoran overconfidence. The hunters had become the hunted. Open fire, Vex commanded, her voice cutting through the bridge's tense silence like a blade. The Phantom Fleet unleashed hell from the spaces between dimensions. Exotic matter torpedoes materialized inside Velthoran shields, their dimensional collapse creating implosions that tore through quantum barriers as if they were paper. The alien formation, designed for orbital bombardment rather than fleet engagement, found itself catastrophically exposed. The dreadnought, crushing victory, simply ceased to exist as 3 phantom torpedoes struck its core simultaneously. One moment, it was a kilometer-long instrument of destruction. The next, it was expanding particles and twisted metal. Its death scream echoed across all frequencies as its quantum core collapsed into a miniature black hole before dissipating. By the void, Nixandra whispered aboard the Infinite Dominion. They're firing from folded space. Our return fire is passing through empty coordinates while their ships remain untouchable. Admiral Kreshva watched in horror as her fleet died around her. The humans weren't just invisible. They were untouchable, existing in a state where conventional physics didn't apply. Her vessel's mighty weapons fired uselessly at empty space while death materialized from nowhere to claim ship after ship. Tactical. "Withdrawal," she ordered. "All vessels, execute emergency jump to hyperspace," but even retreat was denied them. As Velthoran ships began charging their faster-than-light drives, the Phantom vessels revealed another terrifying capability. Dimensional anchor mines materialized around fleeing ships, creating gravity wells that prevented hyperspace transitions. The aliens found themselves trapped in normal space with an enemy they couldn't fight. Captain Vex watched the enemy's growing desperation with cold satisfaction. Target their command vessels first. Cut off their coordination. The battle, if it could be called that, was entirely one-sided. Velthoran weapons designed to penetrate conventional shields and armor were useless against targets that existed partially outside reality. Their sensors, calibrated for tracking objects in normal spacetime, couldn't maintain locks on vessels that phased in and out of dimensional visibility. "Ma'am," reported Cairn from communications, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 enemy vessels. They're requesting terms." "No terms," Vex replied flatly. "They showed no mercy to our colonies. Luna Base, Ceres Station, the research facility on Europa, 2 million civilians dead because they wanted our system's resources. The Phantom fleet continued its methodical destruction. Each human vessel was a masterpiece of impossible engineering, built with technology that existed at the intersection of quantum mechanics and exotic matter physics. Their pilots had trained for years in dimensional combat, learning to fight, battles that occurred across multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Weapons Officer Vale's targeting systems painted the enemy fleet with quantum markers invisible to their sensors. "Admiral's flagship is attempting to break orbit. Shall we pursue?" Negative. Let them see what's waiting for them. As the infinite Dominion desperately burned toward the edge of Earth's gravity well, Kreshva's compound eyes widened in terror. Her sensors detected dozens of additional gravitational signatures lying in wait along every possible escape vector. The humans hadn't just hidden one fleet, they had concealed an entire armada throughout the solar system. "Admiral!" Yexral's voice cracked with panic. "There are human stealth vessels everywhere, between Mars and Jupiter in the asteroid belt around Saturn's rings. We're surrounded on all sides by enemies we can't see or fight." The scope of human deception became clear. While the Velthorans had been congratulating themselves on their easy victory, humanity had been positioning an invisible navy throughout their own system, turning their home into a trap baited with their apparent defeat. "How many?" Kreshva demanded. "Conservative estimate? 300 vessels. Admiral, how did we not detect a fleet this size?" The answer was as terrifying as it was simple. Humanity had surpassed them technologically while allowing them to believe in their own superiority. The primitives had become the apex predators, and the Velthoran armada was about to learn why humans were called the galaxy's most dangerous prey. The tactical situation deteriorated with each passing moment. Admiral Kreshva's once mighty armada, reduced to fewer than 60 operational vessels, found itself completely outmaneuvered by an enemy that shouldn't exist. The humans weren't just using superior technology, they were rewriting the fundamental rules of space combat. "Status report," Kreshva demanded, her primary arms trembling with barely controlled rage and growing fear. 47 vessels destroyed, 18 critically damaged, Yexral reported, his mandibles clicking in distress. "Our conventional weapons cannot engage targets that phase between dimensional states. They appear, fire, and vanish before our targeting systems can acquire locks." The Phantom fleet moved through the battle space like deadly phantoms, materializing just long enough to deliver killing blows before fading back into dimensional obscurity. Their coordination was flawless. each vessel supporting others in a three-dimensional chess game played across multiple layers of reality. Captain Vex monitored the battle from her position aboard the Shadowhawk. The enemy's confusion was complete. Centuries of Velthoran tactical doctrine rendered obsolete in a single engagement. Enemy flagship is attempting to reach minimum safe distance for hyperspace jump, Draxton reported. Orders, Captain. Deploy the Phantom Web, Vex commanded. Show them there's nowhere to run. Across the battle space, human vessels began releasing. Specialized drones that existed in the same dimensional state as their parent ships. These devices, invisible to enemy sensors, created a network of spatial distortions that made faster-than-light travel impossible within a massive sphere encompassing the entire inner solar system. Aboard the Infinite Dominion, Nixandra's instruments registered the impossible. Admiral, hyperspace is sealed. The humans have created some kind of dimensional barrier. We cannot escape to faster-than-light speeds. The implications struck Kreshova like a physical blow. The humans had trapped the entire Velthoran fleet in normal space, surrounded by invisible enemies they couldn't fight. It was a tactical masterpiece that would be studied in military academies across the galaxy if any Velthorans survived to tell the tale. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Cairn announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the enemy flagship. Audio only." Vex nodded. "Put it through." Admiral Kreshova's voice, translated through universal protocols, filled the bridge of the Shadowhawk. The arrogance was gone, replaced by desperate confusion. "Human vessels, I am Admiral Kreshova of the Velthoran Imperial Navy. Your technology? It is impossible. Our science indicates dimensional combat is theoretical at best." "Your science is limited by your imagination," Vex replied coolly. "You assumed that because you couldn't see something, it didn't exist. That assumption just cost you an armada. What do you want? Terms for surrender? Resource concessions? We can negotiate." "You misunderstand the situation, Admiral. You're not in a position to negotiate anything. Your fleet entered our system, murdered our civilians, and declared victory. Now you face the consequences of underestimating humanity." The dimensional anchor field tightened around the remaining Velthoran vessels. Escape was impossible. Conventional. Combat was futile, and surrender seemed meaningless against an enemy they couldn't comprehend. "How?" Kreshova's voice carried genuine bewilderment. "Your species was classified as technologically primitive. Your ships used chemical rockets and fusion drives. How did you develop dimensional warfare capabilities?" Vex's smile was visible in her voice. "You observed our public technology, Admiral. You never suspected we might have private developments. Humanity has a saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. We've been watching the galaxy for longer than you know, learning from every species we encountered, including yours." The revelation hit the Velthoran command like a meteorite. The humans hadn't been technological primitives. They had been the galaxy's most successful intelligence operation, hiding their true capabilities while studying everyone else's weaknesses. Predators had been playing a completely different game all along. The remaining Velthoran vessels hung motionless in space, their crews paralyzed by the impossibility of their situation. Every military doctrine, every tactical principle they had learned, became useless against an enemy that could exist outside the normal laws of physics while striking from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Captain Vex stood before the main display, aboard the Shadowhawk, watching as her phantom vessels methodically disabled rather than destroyed the remaining alien ships. This phase of the operation required precision. They needed intelligence, not just victory. "Boarding teams are ready, Captain," announced Lieutenant Commander Draxton. "The dimensional transporters will allow us to phase directly through their hull armor." "Execute," Vex ordered. "Priority targets are command centers, computer cores, and any scientific personnel. We need their complete technological database and military intelligence. Across the battle space, human soldiers materialized inside Velthoran vessels like ghosts becoming solid. The dimensional transport technology allowed them to bypass shields, armor, and defensive systems entirely. They appeared in critical locations. Simultaneously, overwhelming alien crews who couldn't understand how enemies had penetrated their strongest defenses. Aboard the Infinite Dominion, Admiral Kreshva watched in helpless fury as her bridge officers were systematically captured by humans who walked through walls as if they were made of air. The boarding party leader, a tall woman with augmented reflexes and dimensional phase equipment, approached her command chair with casual confidence. "Admiral Kreshva," the human said, her voice filtered through a translation unit. "I am Major Senna Ravencrest, Earth Stellar Marines. You will surrender your command codes and provide access to your ship's databases." "I will die first," Kreshva snarled, her 6 arms reaching for concealed weapons. "That can be arranged," Ravencrest replied calmly, "but it won't prevent us from accessing your systems. Our quantum computers can break Velthoran encryption in approximately 47 minutes. Cooperation simply determines whether you live to see the results." The human's matter-of-fact delivery was more terrifying than any threat. Kreshva realized she was facing soldiers who had spent years preparing for this exact scenario, down to the precise timing of their computer intrusion capabilities. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Captain Vex was receiving reports from across the captured fleet. Each alien vessel yielded treasures of intelligence, star charts showing Velthoran territory, technological specifications for their weapons and defenses, and most importantly, detailed records of their military capabilities and current deployments. "Captain," reported Intelligence Officer Castor Nightbane, his cybernetic implants interfacing directly with captured alien databases, "the intelligence yield is extraordinary. The Velthorans aren't just conquerors. They're part of a larger galactic confederation. 7 species working together to claim territory and resources. They viewed Earth as an easy target for expansion." "Show me their military structure," Vex commanded. The holographic display filled with star maps and fleet dispositions. The Velthoran Empire controlled 43 star systems and maintained standing fleets totaling over 3,000 vessels. Their Confederation partners, the crystalline Zorthai, the cybernetic Mechari, and others, each contributed additional military assets to their collective expansion efforts. "They've been systematically conquering primitive species for over 2 centuries, Nightbane continued. Their records show 47 successful planetary subjugations. They classify civilizations by technological development and target those they consider defenseless." Vex studied the data with growing anger. Humanity hadn't been the Velthorans' first victim. They were simply the latest in a long line of species that had been enslaved or exterminated for the crime of appearing weak. "What's their assessment of human capabilities based on this engagement?" she asked. "Complete revision of threat classification. They're recommending immediate withdrawal from human space and upgrading our species to apex predator status." Admiral Kreshva's final transmission before capture recommended that the Confederation avoid human territory entirely. "Too late for that," Vex murmured. "Signal the fleet. Phase 2 of Operation Revenant is authorized. It's time to send a message to this Confederation that will ensure they never threaten Earth again." The Phantom Fleet began moving toward the outer system, carrying with them not just the captured alien vessels, but complete intelligence on their enemies' military capabilities, territorial holdings, and strategic weaknesses. The hunters had become the hunted. Now the ghosts were going to become the nightmare that haunted an entire Galactic Confederation's dreams. 3 weeks after the Battle of Earth, the Velthoran Military Command Center on Kethmore Prime received reports that would shake the foundation of their empire. Admiral Vorthak stood before the massive holographic display, his mandibles clicking in disbelief as intelligence officers updated the tactical situation. "Impossible," he muttered, reviewing the data streams. 7 research installations, completely destroyed. No survivors, no wreckage, no evidence of the attackers. They simply ceased to exist. The pattern was consistent across Velthoran space. Critical military and research facilities were vanishing without warning, their destruction so complete that investigators found only empty space where installations had stood for decades. No debris fields, no energy signatures, no survivors to describe the attackers. The dimensional disturbance readings match those from Admiral Kresheva's final transmission, reported Science Officer Dexara, her scaled features reflecting genuine fear. The humans are using their phantom technology for surgical strikes throughout our territory. Vorthak studied the star charts showing affected systems. Each target had been chosen with surgical precision: weapons research facilities, advanced shipyards, communication relay stations, and strategic command centers. The humans weren't just attacking, they were systematically dismantling Velthoran military capabilities while remaining completely invisible. Meanwhile, in the void between stars, the Phantom Fleet operated from mobile bases that existed in folded space. Captain Vex commanded her expanded force from the bridge of the Shadowhawk, now serving as flagship for over 200 stealth vessels. The captured Velthoran intelligence had provided target lists that would cripple their enemy's ability to project power across the galaxy. Status report on Operation Nemesis, Vex requested. Phase 3. Complete, reported Commander Draxton. All primary weapons research facilities in the Keth Moore system have been neutralized. Their quantum torpedo development program no longer exists. Casualties? Minimal. Precision dimensional strikes eliminated only military installations and equipment. Civilian populations were untouched. This restraint was deliberate strategy. Unlike the Velthorans, who had slaughtered human civilians without hesitation, Earth's phantom forces targeted only military assets. The psychological impact was devastating. An enemy that could destroy anything they chose but selected targets with surgical precision was far more terrifying than indiscriminate killers. Intelligence Officer Nightbane. Report on Confederation. Response. Panic, Captain, Nightbane replied with satisfaction. 3 members of the Galactic Confederation have withdrawn their fleets to defensive positions around their home systems. The crystalline Zorthii have actually broken their alliance with the Velthorans entirely, citing inability to defend against dimensional warfare threats. The strategy was working perfectly. By demonstrating absolute superiority while showing restraint toward civilians, humanity was forcing their enemies to confront an uncomfortable truth. Earth had become the apex predator in this region of the galaxy, and continued aggression would result in systematic destruction of military assets. Sir, Communications Officer Cairn announced, we're receiving a priority transmission from Velthoran Command. They're requesting diplomatic contact. Vex smiled coldly. Put it through. Admiral Vorthak's image appeared on the display. His alien features showing stress and desperation. Human Commander, I am Admiral Vorthak of the Velthoran Imperial Navy. We wish to discuss terms. Terms? Vex's voice carried Arctic coldness. Your armada murdered 2 million of our civilians. Your Confederation has enslaved 47 species over 2 centuries. What terms could you possibly offer that would interest us? Withdrawal. Complete cessation of military operations in human space. We acknowledge your superior capabilities. You misunderstand the situation, Admiral. This isn't a negotiation about human space. This is about justice for every species your Confederation has slaughtered or enslaved over the past 2 centuries. The transmission fell silent as the implications became clear. The humans weren't seeking territorial protection. They were demanding accountability for centuries of galactic oppression. We can provide reparations, technology transfers, territorial concessions. What we want, Vex interrupted, is simple. Complete military disarmament of the Confederation, supervised by human observers. Release of all enslaved species. And prosecution of war criminals responsible for genocide. Impossible. The Confederation would never agree to such terms. Then the Confederation will cease to exist, Vex replied with absolute finality. We have your complete military intelligence, Admiral. We know the location of every fleet, every installation, every strategic asset you possess. Your choice is simple. Accept justice or face extinction. The transmission ended, leaving the Phantom Fleet to continue its invisible war against an enemy that had finally realized they were facing forces beyond their comprehension. 6 months after the first Phantom strike, the Velthoran Confederations, surrender was signed aboard the ESS Shadowhawk in a ceremony that redefined galactic power structures. Admiral Vorthak, representing what remained of Confederation leadership, stood before Captain Vex with the defeated posture of a predator species learning humility. The terms are non-negotiable, Vex stated, her voice carrying the authority of absolute victory. Complete military disarmament under human supervision. Immediate release of all enslaved species. War crimes tribunals for those responsible for genocide, and technological reparations to every species your Confederation has wronged. The alien admiral's mandibles clicked in resigned defeat. The Confederation Council has voted to accept these terms. We underestimated your species' capabilities. You underestimated our resolve, Vex corrected. Your Confederation made the mistake of believing that might makes right. Now you learn that true strength isn't the ability to destroy. It's the wisdom to know when restraint serves justice better than annihilation. Throughout Confederation space, Phantom Fleet vessels emerged from dimensional hiding to oversee the systematic dismantling of military assets. The process was unprecedented in galactic history, an entire multi-species empire submitting to occupation and reconstruction by forces they couldn't see, track, or resist. The liberated species' reactions ranged from disbelief to overwhelming gratitude. The aquatic Meryathi, enslaved for over a century, wept tears of joy as human phantom ships appeared over their homeworld. The insectoid Kliktar, whose civilization had been nearly exterminated, could barely comprehend that their tormentors were being held accountable. Status report on liberation operations, Vex requested from her command center, now relocated to a massive phantom station that existed in folded space between dimensions. 47 species freed from Confederation control, reported Commander Draxton. All former slave worlds have established preliminary governments with human advisors. The war crimes tribunals have processed over 3,000 cases of genocide and systematic oppression. Resistance? Minimal. 3 Confederation members attempted to rebuild military assets in secret. Their facilities were eliminated within hours of detection. The remainder have fully complied with disarmament protocols. The transformation was complete. The Galactic Confederation that had terrorized dozens of species for centuries now existed as a collection of disarmed, supervised territories, slowly learning to coexist peacefully with their former victims. But the true revelation came when other galactic powers attempted to fill the power vacuum left by Confederation collapse. The crystalline hegemony, the machine collective known as the Grid, and the psionic Dominion all sent fleets to claim former Confederation territory. They found phantom vessels waiting for them. Attention approaching fleets, Vex broadcast across all frequencies as alien armadas entered former Confederation space. This region is under Earth Protectorate status. Any military vessels entering this territory without authorization will be disabled, and their crews detained for questioning. The response was predictable. Various species militaries, convinced that humans were bluffing about their capabilities, pressed forward with standard conquest formations. They learned otherwise very quickly. The Battle of Kepler's Crossing lasted exactly 47 minutes. 3 separate alien fleets, totaling over 800 vessels, were systematically disabled by phantom ships that appeared from nowhere, struck with impossible precision, and vanished before return fire could be coordinated. Not a single human vessel was damaged, while the alien fleets found themselves completely helpless. "This is impossible," transmitted Admiral Zalvi of the Crystalline Hegemony as his flagship's weapons systems were selectively destroyed by attacks that bypassed his shields entirely. "No species possesses this level of technological advantage." "You're thinking like the Confederation did," Vex replied over open channels. "You assume that military power equals the right to take what you want. Earth's Phantom Fleet exists to ensure that era of galactic history is permanently ended." The message spread across known space with the speed of quantum communication. Humanity had emerged from apparent defeat to become the galaxy's uncontested military power, but rather than becoming conquerors themselves, they had appointed themselves guardians of peace. Within 2 years, what became known as the Phantom Doctrine had transformed galactic civilization. Military expansion was no longer possible when invisible human fleets could appear anywhere, anytime, to disable aggressors with impunity. Species that had spent millennia preparing for conquest were forced to redirect their efforts toward diplomacy, trade, and peaceful exploration. Captain Vex, now Admiral of the Phantom Fleet, stood on the observation deck of her flagship, watching. Earth turned slowly below. The planet that had appeared defenseless to its enemies had become the center of a new galactic order built on the principle that true strength served protection, not domination. "Ma'am," reported her aide, Commander Ravencrest, "the Galactic Council has officially recognized Earth as the protector species for the local group. 43 species have requested membership in the Earth Alliance." Vex smiled, remembering the moment when Velthoran ships had hung in Earth's orbit, believing themselves unopposed. They had thought the orbit was clear, never suspecting that humanity's greatest weapons were invisible, patient, and absolutely lethal when finally revealed. The galaxy had learned that humans were far more dangerous as protectors than they had ever been as prey. "Signal the fleet," Vex commanded. "Maintain standard patrol schedules. And remind all Phantom commanders, we are guardians now, not conquerors. Our teeth remain sharp so that others may sleep peacefully." In the depths of space, hundreds of invisible vessels continued their eternal watch, ensuring that the galaxy's nightmare of conquest and slavery would never return. They had thought Earth's orbit was clear. Instead, they had discovered that humanity's greatest strength was knowing when to strike from the shadows and when to step into the light as protectors of peace. The age of Phantom Guardians had begun.